Hello YouTube, this is a YouTube video. I'm Ethan Ainsworth and you're currently watching me. So I thought that apropos the new Spider-Man 2099 in Amazing Spider-Man crossover in the one-shot Spider-Man 2099 Alpha, I'd talk a little bit about Miguel O'Hara. Miguel O'Hara is the Spider-Man of 2099. That is to say, the alternate future of the Marvel Universe, created by Peter David and Stan Lee. Actually, Stan Lee would contribute to this universe quite heavily with his character Ravage. And Ravage is about as 90s as you can get on the Marvel end of the spectrum without involving Rob Liefeld in the project. But that didn't go anywhere, like most of the books from that era. There's of course Ghost Rider 2099, Doom 2099. There's actually like a past version of Doctor Doom who came to the future. There's Fantastic Four 2099, X-Men 2099, Punisher 2099. The only real successful book from that run, Pulp 2099. The only successful book from that series, that is to say that imprint, is Spider-Man 2099. And there's good reason for it. Well, one, Spider-Man, so you have a built-in sort of fan base, a built-in demographic. Anytime you title anything Spider-Man. But Peter David has a really interesting world he builds in this book, I think. So basically, sort of everything went to shit, as it were, at some point in the past, and the records are a little bit muddy, so we're not really sure what happened, but, and I believe they reveal it later on what happened, but I don't care about that. Basically, at some point in the past, some point before 2099, an event happened that basically wiped out the superheroes, and so since that point, all the way up to the year 2099, there were no superheroes at all, and so we don't get anything from the heroic age, which is what they call the period before the heroes died, all the way up to 2099. And in 2099, brilliant geneticist Miguel O'Hara is he's working for Alchemax, and Alchemax is the company that basically owns the east coast of the United States. I believe Stark Industries owns the west coast of the United States, and at this point in the future, California had crashed into the ocean for the large part. And so, in this sort of society, it's sort of very Big Brother-esque. There's something called the public eye, which is the police force that monitors everything. There's not a lot of freedom. There's a lot of division between classes. There's an area in the base of New York called the basement, and basically that would be like the first few dozen floors, and everything above that mark is where like the elite would live. And so basically, the more money you have, the more important you are in this society, the higher up in the high-rises you are. And at this point, the high-rises are like ridiculous story counts, so like 2, 3, 4, 500 floors, stuff like that. And so Miguel O'Hara, being a high-up big brain in Alchemax, he's obviously at the very tippy top. But what happens is one day, he is experimenting on himself because he basically betrays his company, and in doing so, he has slipped a drink that contains a drug that codes itself to your DNA, and so you are basically genetically predisposed to need this substance in order to survive. It will, first of all, it will have all of the standard drug symptoms, but it will also cause you to die if you don't have it because it's now a part of your fabric. And so, being the brilliant geneticist he is in the year 2099, he uses his genetic encoder machine, which he was developing to help create things like super soldiers, and he uses a previously existing backup of his own DNA, and he basically factory resets himself to his genetic code prior to his being slipped the drug. However, a jealous colleague of his, who doesn't much like him, decides to put an unfinished version of Miguel's spider project into the DNA sequence as the machine is running, which causes the machine to misfire and explode, which also resulted in this sort of slightly wonky version of the spider powers that Miguel O'Hara exhibits in this book. Now, Miguel O'Hara has in many ways the standard Spider-Man powers. However, there are a few differences. One, his webs are organic rather than being brilliant devices that Peter Parker built. And he has talons that stick into walls, incredibly sharp talons that he accidentally kills somebody with in the first arc of the book. But basically this allows him to sort of dig into things and climb the walls that way. So if you take, it's more of sort of an ant than it is a spider. If you ever look at an ant under a microscope, which I recommend you do because it's awesome, you will see that rather than having little hairs like a spider does, they have like little almost talons that dig into things. And so that's what Miguel O'Hara has. His eyes are also highly sensitive to light, so he has to be careful exposing himself to high light environments. Another rather unfortunate byproduct of his genetic mutation is that Miguel O'Hara has fangs. And what this does is he can bite somebody by pulling up his mask, and he can stun them with his venom, as it were. So I assume he has some sort of gland somewhere in his body that now produces that. I'm not really sure, they don't go into it. But his suit is made of something called unstable molecule fabric, and unstable molecules were discovered by Reed Richards, and he would later go on to use them in Fantastic Four costumes, and that's why Sue's costume can turn invisible, that's why his costume can stretch, that's why Johnny's costume can catch a blaze without being damaged. And Peter Parker himself would later go on to use unstable molecules in his own costume in his Parker Industries spider armor, but even prior to that, during the Big Time era by Dan Slott, he was using it to sort of build his costume and allow it to turn back into street clothes. That is to say, at least something resembling street clothes when he was done with the Spider-Man costume, and that would allow him to sort of blend in easier without having to web his costume to his back all the time. So that was rundown of Miguel O'Hara's powers, abilities, and origins. I hope you enjoyed. It's a little different from the videos I usually do, but nonetheless, I hope it was of quality. Also, if you subscribe, you can have my firstborn child.